Hello, my friends. Nick from Gorley Records here. So I've been on the hunt for some time to look for something as like an in-the-box solution to, let's say, a Moog DFAM, where it had just a really simple drum sequencer and really simple parameters that were set up specifically to make, kick sounds or just really easy hi-hat snare, just synthesized drum sounds. And I couldn't really find anything that was quite what I was looking for. So I actually started to learn Max for Live and even created my first Max for Live device called Melodizer and was going to work towards a solution to find this DFAM replacement. And as I was doing that, this new product came on the market by force called Opal. It is a rhythm machine and drum synthesizer and really so much more, and it kind of checked all the boxes I was looking for and also looks super cool. And now I don't have to spend hours creating what I was thinking because it's already been created and exists right now and is actually probably way cooler than what I was planning on making anyway. To say the least, Opal is a beast with multiple sound engines built into it, independent sequencers for each engine, the ability to automate parameters of each engine during each step. It has a sampler, multiple outputs. All of the engines also can be pulled out and used alone by themselves, including the sequencer, which can be used on its own. And it's really truly just an inspiration machine and just really easy to learn and a lot of fun to use. And this is a Max for Live device, so you're either going to need Ableton Live Suite or the Max for Live add-on to Ableton, and it won't be able to be used in other DAWs. And it all comes wrapped up in a price tag of $50, which considering you're getting multiple standalone engines as well as the whole Opal ecosystem in and of itself in one package, I think it is well worth the price tag. Now, full disclosure, while this video is not sponsored by Opal, they did send me this software for free, but they didn't reach out to me, I reached out to them because I saw this as a really inspirational tool and I offered making this video as a trade for this software because I could just see this as something that I would be using a lot in my workflow and just wanted to get the word out about this. And they're also a small team of about 3 people, so they're independent just like myself, so I thought it would also be constructive to support other people making Max for Live devices. And they also sell a bunch of other really cool products which you could also check out. I will put the link for Opal down below in the description. It is not an affiliate link. I'm just sharing it because I think this is a really cool tool. So let's jump in the box and check this thing out.
Okay, so here we are in Ableton Live. We have Opal added to a track. Down here in the bottom window, you will see sort of a mixing section. This lets you sort of disable or enable the different engines, adjust their levels, pannings. This is like a low pass, high pass filter, as well as add some reverb send in there. When you click Open Editor, it opens the full window of Opal, and you can scale it up here. Boop, make it nice and big. And I really don't even know where to begin with this thing because this thing is so powerful. So basically the setup is on the left side here, you have a sequencer, and this is set up for each individual engine. So if I adjust a sequencer there, that's only for this engine that we're selected here. You can cycle through the engines in the center here, and each engine can have its own independent sequencer. So on the left, you have the sequencer for each engine, and on the right, you have the controls for that engine. So this first engine you have, this is Gem. This is like an FM synthesizer. The second one you have is Mass, and this is a Modulo synthesizer. Let's just adjust our steps here. We're just kind of making noise initially. You have Dust, which is a pulsar synthesizer. You have Slate, which is a granular synthesizer, which uses a sample. We probably won't get too much into this one. And then here at the bottom, this is effects, and the sequencer for effects actually is for this flux sampler. So this actually is a sampler that is sampling everything going on within Opal. It has its own sort of granular synthesis sampling settings, but it's sampling everything happening in Opal. And then above that, you have the reverb settings, and to send something to a reverb, you just have to come over here to these sends at the bottom of each section in the mixer, and that will send things to this reverb. Now that's how easy it is to get set up an Opal and just start making some noises. So let's talk more about the power of this sequencer here, because this is really the absolutely incredible high functioning thing of this entire device. Well, it's all incredible and high functioning really, but the sequencer is truly amazing. So I'm going to come to the mixer and I'm just going to mute all of our other sound sources, including the effects. And let's just focus on the sequencer here in Gem. So you can save a lot of patterns in Opal. So here we're just on pattern 1. You can click this and rename it to another name. You can then cycle through all your patterns here. So you can have different patterns stored, pattern 2, and you can cycle between your different patterns. And patterns will also, as you can see, save sort of a preset of your synth settings on the right. You can also copy patterns from one to the next. So I can copy this pattern and say paste it here in pattern 3, paste that pattern. Now we have the same pattern in both our 1 and 3 slot. As you can see here, we can have up to 16 steps, which we can make larger or smaller from here. You can also change how many pages there are on your sequencer. So this is just using 1 page, but here you can have up to 8 pages, and each one of these pages can be programmed independently. And then when you play, it will just cycle through all of these pages. So you can program in a ton of steps. I think math is like 120 something math. Yeah, that's not many. So you can really make really long and ornate patterns. But let's just focus on 1 page for now. So down here at the bottom of the sequencer, you have a couple different tabs to click through. This first one it's on by default is parameter locking, which we'll get to in a second. The second one here is just notes. So as you add things in, you can just change what the notes are. If you just turn a step on, and turning a step on is just adjusting this velocity amount here, and you can click them to turn them on and off. It will set the note based on the default note that you have set here. So you can see these are C3 and they're grayed out. This one is E3 because I've adjusted it. But with the ones that are grayed that are set to your default note, as you adjust your default note, it will change all of those. So if you're just programming something like a hi-hat or a snare or just a kick that you want to be in tune with your track, you can easily adjust it here. But if you're getting into more making like a melody line, then once you have a bunch of these set to something different, then adjusting this isn't going to do anything. You'll have to adjust everything independently. Now you can click and drag these to adjust their velocity, but if you just click to turn it off, notice here it says D#4. If I click to turn that off and turn it back on again, it will reset this default to whatever my note is down here. So whenever you turn off a step, it erases not only the note, but every other setting you have in all of these parameters here when you turn them on and off. So just keep that in mind. So let's just press play, and I'm just going to adjust some quick settings and run through the rest of these tabs to show you the fun stuff that they do. I'm also going to turn this down to just 4 steps just to make it quicker to demonstrate these things. This is also your rate of how fast it's going to cycle through your steps. Okay, so we got a little sound going. So the next tab here is probability. This is just simple probability, whether the note's going to play or not, just calculates every time. We'll just keep it at 100 for now. This section here is Modulo. This is a really interesting section. So here you have 2 numbers. The one on the left, as you drag it, it doesn't really move. You saw it flash for 2 for a second, but it doesn't really adjust up or down. Instead, you have to adjust the right number. And this is effectively how many bars total it should listen to. So here, this is saying that it's listening to every 2 bars, every 2 playthroughs, rather. Every time your sequencer plays through this twice, it will play it on the first time. So let me pause it. Let me add a second one here just to explain this easier. So here we have both set. The right number is to 2, which means it will listen to 2 full playthroughs of your pattern length. This one, the note will activate on the first playthrough, and then this will be muted. And then the second time the sequencer plays through, it will play this note. And to further demonstrate this, let's just change these notes to different things. So this will be an octave lower, and this will be an octave higher. So when I press play, you'll hear the low note first, and then when it plays through a second time, you won't hear the low note, but you'll hear the high note. So I'm just going to press play, and you'll hear that. So that's Modulo explained in a nutshell. It's really cool. You can take this up to 8 loops through, so you can have something play through on just the second time it plays through, 7th time it plays through, whatever. So you can get really creative with this. This next tab here, this is ratcheting, and that does exactly what you expect it to, where it on this step, it will play that note however many times you have here, up to 8 ratchets. You can also adjust the swing of said ratchet as well. This is also especially useful for things like hi-hats, snare rolls, that sort of thing. Really just another tool at your disposal here. This last step here is nudge. This is sort of like a swing, basically. Just lets you add a little bit more flavor to your sequence. Now, jumping back to this first tab with this parameter lock, this is a really powerful feature. So what this does is if I want to have a certain step automate a certain parameter, I can click that parameter, and you see as I click the different elements here on the right side for my engine, that it adjusts what it says down here to let you know what you're modifying. So we can adjust like the decay for the modulation here. We can adjust, you know, the attack for our envelope. We could adjust the mod depth. So let me just demonstrate this by, so we have mod depth selected. So here it will adjust the knob to the right. Here it will adjust the knob to the left. And once you click away to something else, so if I click feedback, you'll see these reset to 0. So you can have everything on your synth programmed. Now, these locks aren't just limited to what's on your engine here. You can also do things like come down here to your mixer and click your mix reverb. So you can have a lot of reverb just for a certain step. And we got to make sure our reverb is turned on to hear this. And you can also adjust your cutoff, your panning, volume, all that fun jazz. So this just lets you program more unique sound into each step. So let's just play what we did here. And when we turned this on, we turned this this flux sampler on as well. It's all built into one, so let's just turn this flux sampler off. So now you hear the reverb on that one step. You can hear the mod changing a little bit on these steps. Let's also maybe add some noise to these steps. So you can really just click any of these parameters and just start going to town with adjusting how they're modulated on each step. Now, the only disappointing part about this is you can't tell on each step what is modified. There's no indicator saying like this knob is being modified by a step. So you kind of just have to click through all the parameters if you want to see what is being adjusted, which is sort of a bummer, but there's not really a great workaround for this in Max for Live without impacting performance significantly. Now that I've learned how to make stuff in Max for Live, I understand why there is no visual indicator for that, but you know, it's whatever. It's not really a huge deal. And if you find a step is just absolutely bananas, like here you can see this third step. We have a bunch of different things modulated for it. But yeah, when you click that step and turn it back on and just reset this back to whatever your root note is here, and it will undo all of the modulation parameters and stuff. Now, speaking of modulation, over here on each engine is this other tab. And this will open up sort of a mod matrix for how you can modulate the sound even more. Now, here on the left side, you have your mod sources, and here on the top is your destinations. So things like velocity, which is how much this slider is turned up, what your LFO is set to, and you can skew the LFO, change it from sync to just free, change into some basic waves. Your envelope, here you have an envelope down here, or just random, which is like a sample and hold. Here with these destinations, you can actually click these and set them to whatever you want. So let's say on our engine here, I want to have the noise level adjusted. I can click this, find my noise level, and I can choose to have my velocity or LFO or whatever adjusting that noise level. That sounds kind of gnarly, but you get the idea. Same with the envelope, how much this envelope is going to apply to something. So every step it will trigger this attack and decay from this envelope. Random, again, will just be random. And this is independent of what you have here for these parameter locks. So you could have these parameter locks and this going at the same time. So you can kind of get the idea with just working with, right now we're just in this one engine and there's all this creative potential. And we haven't even gotten into adding other layers on here. All right, so let's move on to adding another pattern on here just to show how groovy we can get with this thing. So I went ahead and removed some of the parameters from my parameter locks for this gem engine here. Let's move on to mass. Reset our steps here, and note that the note changes for each engine. So here we're on A2, so let's just make sure we're still in key here. Let's at least just change this to A3. And we have to turn this back on because we had turned this off before. And let's say you know, we were kind of messing with this. We couldn't really find a sound that we liked very much. A really awesome feature that they added into this, and by the way, they update this plugin. I've already gotten like 3 updates for this thing, and they just add more and more features in. So when you click this button here, it opens up the randomizer. And here you can see we have a sound section and a pattern section with each of the symbols for each of our engines within each of these. So right now we are working here on mass. So we can click this button here and it will randomize a sound for mass. So let's just click through and find a couple sounds we think are interesting, or not a couple, just one. That's interesting. Here we go. All right, and we already got a groovy sound going. Now, this wiggle button allows it to wiggle the sound just a little bit. So if we like the sound, but thought it could use a few adjustments, we could click this wiggle button and it will sort of just gradually just wiggle a few parameters within this area. So that's kind of an interesting sound. Now, let's say we also wanted to randomize the pattern. So here again, we have the pattern, and then down here, we have density, which is going to be how many steps there are in the pattern, and locks, which is going to be how many different parameters are going to be programmed into this lock section here. So let's go ahead and say we want a decent, oops, wrong one. We want a decent density, and maybe we like the sound, so we don't want to have too many automations to the sound, so we'll just do that. So once we have sort of our general density and how many parameter locks we want, we can click the icon for this engine, and it will randomize the steps. Now you'll see it, even though it generated 16 steps of patterns, it kept our 8 that we had here. So if we want to listen to what that full 16 is, then we can do that. So if we don't like those steps, we can again just keep clicking through and sort of randomize it every time, just for the sake of getting a bunch of different locks. I'll show you one with a ton of different parameter locks. Yeah, so the parameter locks can get absolutely wild. I'm going to turn off gem for now, just so we can hear mass going on, because I feel like it's probably not as audible as it could be. And that's because our tone was turned down a bunch. Okay, so now we can hear it a little better. Let's turn the other one back on. So if we didn't like the arrangement of these, again, we can scramble them around. If we find something is off time a little bit, we can push it forward and backwards, the whole pattern 1 step or whatever. So let's say we wanted this here to show up maybe 1 step further. Let's go. Push it forward. Maybe we think there's too many parameter locks, turn them down. Maybe there's too many notes, adjust those, do a whole new shuffle. Maybe I just like this section and I just want these 4 notes to play. We can push it back until those are at our 1, and then we can adjust our pattern down to just those 4 notes. Maybe slow this down. Maybe add a little ratcheting. Maybe this one we only want to play every 2 loop throughs with Modulo. Maybe this one's got a probability set on it. Okay, now let's say that's good enough for that pattern. Let's move on to Dust, which had some patterns familiar. We'll unmute it. Let's go ahead and just turn 1 step on. Oh, let's make sure we're on a... Let's make sure we're in key here. We'll just set it also to A. Why not? Turn the reverb off on it. Maybe we'll have it... Be more steps. Maybe have this step ratchet. Maybe have it, the ratchet also playing on the 4th loop through. go to our parameter lock here, and we want to say adjust the actual randomization amount here. Maybe on this note, we also want to have the release a little bit longer. Oops, I turned it off. Control Z to undo that. Click our release here. Maybe have this set as a probability. Let's click our reverb here. Go back to our Modulo, mix reverb, and we'll have maybe these little weaker steps, sending a little bit to reverb. So, as you can see, this is just really fast and easy to get a groove set up and going, whether you're randomizing everything or going through and programming steps individually. So it's really just an incredible tool. Now, I'm sure some of you in the back of your head, you're noticing that we're just working on one track and we have all this audio on one track. And from a mixing standpoint, that might become more annoying later on in the process when you get to mixing your whole track and you have 3, I guess 4, 5, 6 engines running at the same time. And to that, as stated earlier, we have the ability to send each of these engines to their own output. So here I'm going to jump into a more overall Ableton trick that I highly recommend all of you do. So let's close this for now. We've been working with Opal here on just this Opal track. But if I create an audio track, when you hit audio from, you can see that you can click Opal and there are a bunch of different outputs. And when I press play, you'll notice each of these outputs has separate audio signals. So we can route Opal into different audio tracks and record the audio directly to those tracks and then be able to mix those tracks independently, add effects to each independent engine and so forth. Now I can create a bunch of different audio tracks here, and for each one, every time I want to use Opal, come in here and select the output for each one. But every time you're doing this in a project, this gets kind of annoying to do and a bit of a hassle. So this now lends into a larger Ableton trick that I do. So I have a template that I have saved that I named one routed instruments, and this makes sure it pops up. Having the one there just lets it pop at the top of my list. And this is a Ableton project and has a bunch of different instruments built into it, all with their routing. So it's things like VSTs that have multiple outputs, as well as the routings for like my hardware synthesizers that each have their own MIDI channels and stuff like that. So when you have a project and you save it as a template, it lets you see each individual track within that template. So this one template I have that has all my routed instruments allows me to drag just the track I want. So here I have For's Opal, and within this is all my routing. So if I just drag this whole group onto my project, you can see I now have this group that instantly was brought in, and it starts with this main MIDI channel here, which has Opal loaded up. And then you'll see here I have 6 audio tracks, each one of these named to what the engines are, and the routing is already set up for each individual one. So now if I have some steps set up, I'll just really quickly just turn some steps on each of these real quick. Shoobadoop boop, skadoop boop boop. So now I can mute the main MIDI track, and if I want to, I can start recording on each of these individual tracks here. And so now if I record, it will record all these to their own audio tracks, which means now I can come through each individual track, add my own effects that I want to, arrange it better in my mix in case I want Gem to not be in a certain area or whatever, I can do so. And with a template saved that has this group already made and routed, instead of every time I want to use Opal having to manually create these audio tracks, I can just drag this over, place it in, and everything's already set up and good to go. Fun Ableton hacks. But we don't need all this for this video, so we'll just go ahead and delete that and go back to our other session. Okay, and so I also mentioned that each of these engines within here are also standalone. So let's go ahead and make a new MIDI track. So I have this folder of all the devices just added to my places so I can really quickly access these. So if I wanted Mass, for example, ignore this, that's just my default MIDI track. So if I wanted to have Mass on its own MIDI track, I can load Mass up as a standalone device, and now just the engine will be down here. And now I can play Mass just with a MIDI keyboard without the sequencer. So it's pretty cool. These engines are available to you outside of Opal itself. And if I still want the reverb, I can add in void reverb here. And as mentioned before, the sequencer here, Opal Control, is also available, so you can have the sequencer available, which allows you to control any MIDI device. So instead of mass, let's say we want to control a different device. So I'm going to search for KZO Keys, which is actually a free Ableton instrument that I have on my website. I'll put the link for it down below. I can now use this sequencer, and we'll blow the sequencer up here. I can now use the sequencer to control this MIDI device. So let's just add a couple steps here. Let's actually pick a more like of a pluck sound for this. Oh, I'm going to get rid of void also because there's reverb built into this. Okay. So on top of having our just regular sequencer we saw before, which has all of the same effects and such, we also have this ability to map certain parameters to control whatever MIDI device we want. So here I can press this button, and this will allow us to target what we want to map this to. So if I click this, you'll see that this is now flashing. I can come over here and click a parameter. Let's say the warmth. And now this knob will be tied to that warmth knob. And what this means is that we can come over here to our parameter lock, and we can click our warmth knob, and we can adjust how much we want that knob to be modulated for each individual step. Let's say we also want to map our cutoff filter here. Map that to the filter. Oops, I didn't mean to turn that step off, but I did. We can do a lot. So having this sequencer alone allows you to control anything. You can also control hardware synthesizers with it. You can map these, to a bunch of different parameters and get all kinds of jiggy with it. You still have your sources and destinations envelope here, and you can choose which control these will be assigned to. So really, really powerful stuff. Okay, so just to kind of close this out, I kind of want to show you what the total variety of tonal sounds that you can get out of these different engines are. So I'm just going to kind of do a speed run where I'm just sort of really quickly just adjusting parameters in the fly and just sort of messing with patterns, just so you can kind of get an idea of the power. Truly is what I'm trying to say. I'm going to turn my mic off when I do this, and I'm just going to make a bunch of noises. So I hope you enjoy. And again, this link will be down below to Opal, and hope you find this as inspirational as I do, because this thing has just blown my mind since I've been using it. And yeah, so here's a little auditory demo. Anyway, that is Opal. I hope this was useful to you. It is just fun to just endlessly play around with this thing and just mess around in any way you see fit and just tinker, and there's so much grooviness we're getting out of just this thing. We haven't even added any chords or anything else over the top of it or added it to any beat, so it's truly an amazing tool. Fours, you have made something awesome here, and keep up the great work, my friends. That is a pause, and have a good day. Adios.